Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mercurial Gems. I'm Jen.
I'm Vi.
And this is a continuation of our Pluto series, which we have so deeply loved this rabbit hole. And it's been so fun for us in this series to look at the recorded history of Pluto as it's moved through the different signs, to see common themes of what the sign actually is and how some of the Plutonian themes kind of come about as you look at the sign that it was moving through. We have woven in a lot of interviews within this series. We are getting a tiny little blurb of an interview through the lens of a Pluto Cancer, being able to reflect on her mom's grandparents, which would have put us into some reflection of Pluto Gemini. And so we could hear the themes of that. So we will include that here in this video, but we're mainly going to be speaking to the history, since this is a time frame we can't really get direct interviews on.
Yeah.
So Pluto was in Gemini from 1884 to 1914. And previously, before that, 1639 to 1669. And oh my gosh, we were laughing so hard because we have a lot of Gemini, and the Gemini themes for Pluto and Gemini.
So loud.
So loud. So loud. So we loved it. So to tell a few themes that have happened, and as we've stated for this Pluto series, if you are new to it, Pluto is just a generational planet. It's always going to lump in a collective group to a similar undertone and mission. Pluto spends a different amount of time in the sign, just depending on its orbit. And it stayed in Pluto Gemini actually for a pretty good amount of time. It also moves into Cancer afterwards, stays in that quite a bit of time. And then we have like kind of a more rapid Pluto transit as you look ahead. And so we have loved to study this as generations, but Pluto leads to a lot of intensity. It has a lot of rebirthing around it. There's a lot of shifts and changes, and you kind of meet the strengths and the shadows of the sign in pretty big extremes, because that is just the nature of Pluto. And so that has been how we've moved through it. Definitely check out like your family's lineage. We actually made family trees for ours, going into which of our family lines had what Pluto. And it was like just really, really fun insight to dig into the lived experience of our ancestors.
I also want to speak a little bit to Gemini for anyone who's joining who's a little newer to astrology. That Gemini is duality. It is an air sign, so you cannot box us in. They love stories, but they're not like super in-depth to the story. They just know how to pass it along. They're the messengers, truly. Hermes is very associated with Gemini, for those who are more into like mythos. Gemini also rules early childhood education, local travel, like your more immediate vicinity, and it also rules language.
Yeah, so as we move through the history of the most recent Pluto Gemini, so starting in 1884, the electric car is produced. Gemini has to have a way to move. Like, we cannot be stuck.
But these are not the cars that we know. Like, these cars can only go so far before they need more things.
1884, we have Mark Twain publishes The Adventure of Huckleberry Finn. We love a story. We love an adventure. 1885, we have the production of what was called the vibrating shuttle that becomes the most popular sewing machine. I thought that was just kind of fun in its hobbies. You know, Gemini loves to dabble in all these things, so that felt very fun. The construction of the Statue of Liberty happened in 1886. Then we have in 1887, we get Sherlock Holmes.
So we've already had within just the first little chunk, 2 major considered classic novels published.
In 1889, we have Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. Sky.
When people communicate with their words, but not words, like put picture to it.
And then in 1890, the bike boom sweeps Europe and America. And another form of transportation, especially immediate local transportation.
And 2 wheels. The bicycle. Okay, I hear you.
It's so fun. We also have basketball invented, which I'm just really even seeing the themes of like social gatherings, like some coming together to like watch something.
Yeah.
Like local sport scene comes to
so
play.
Right.
Come hang out with your friends and play something. We get the first commercial film released in 1894. We get Dracula in 1897. The first electric bike is produced in 1897 as well.
Wasted no time.
Yeah, we moved, we got right into more forms of transportation. We get The Wizard of Oz in 1900.
Written.
Yeah, another fun, adventure, imaginative Gemini story. Ford Motor Company is formed in 1903.
Speaking of sports, the first World Series happens in 1903.
Which was, to me, then another way to socially gather. So fun. We get in 1903 also the United States Department of Commerce and Labor was created. Just more ways to pay attention to stuff. Then in 1903, the Wright brothers make their first powered flight.
Now we're in the air.
Yeah, now we're in the air. Another form of travel yet again.
Let's go even faster. Thank you.
We get in 1912 the Titanic sinking.
Too fast.
Bad travel. Not good travel. We went too quick. We didn't think about it.
Icarus.
Gemini. Then we also get Girl Scouts in 1912, which I could so see the Gemini of like giving another perspective and a social gathering. Like I can see like two woven themes of that. We had the largest women's suffrage parade in Washington, D.C. in 1913, which I think was also then giving more perspective of how another group is living, which just helps to spread information. We also had 1913 New York show opening up that actually brought modern art to the public. So just showing from travels like, here's other things that you can learn and see.
Yeah.
And then on the very last year of Gemini Pluto, we also had Henry Ford develop the modern assembly line. So coming up with a way to move things along, move a little quicker. And
which is crazy because in the beginning of this, we just got a car for the first time. So up until then, it's like horse and buggy, maybe a train, and boats.
Yeah, got really big booms of ways to get around.
Crazy.
And so the themes we were really seeing as Pluto was moving through Gemini was obviously transportation, social setting expansion, writing and film stuff starting to come through, especially adventure storytelling and like imaginative storytelling.
As a whole, there are so many ways stories were being told.
Yeah.
It wasn't just through paper and vocal anymore. We have film, we have so that's interesting. And even Starry Night like says so much without having words.
Yeah, and then perspective sharing was kind of like my other big takeaway. And so for Pluto Gemini, like the focus is really to pay attention to its duality of Pluto Sagittarius. And what I find so interesting as we have studied the history of certain celebrities, what we really notice is Pluto Gemini was the first group to travel and have more adventures. It became a lot more accessible to people to move around. I also think this was an interesting before Pluto Cancer because a lot of their memory is having parents that didn't have present parents. And then Pluto Cancer kind of brought it all back into home and family life. But there was this first kind of passage of being able to see places beyond, and it really feels like that's woven into some of the stories of the people's lives we've studied from that time frame. So the first life I will like speak to that we have studied is Zelda Fitzgerald.
Yes.
She is someone who is so Gemini, so Sagittarius. So she's a perfect example for talking about this, and we have nerded out. And how
she left us plenty of writings.
I was gonna say, how did we nerd out? She wrote everything down, which is so Gemini. Wrote it all down so you can read her letters. You can read her diary.
Books that are just chronologically ordered works that people have found of like pages of hers lying around.
She couldn't not talk, and she wasn't allowed to always talk, so she just wrote it all down, which is so.
But then she also found ballet, she found art, she found almost every hobby has some mode of communicating something else.
Yeah. And so she was born in 1900. So in the peak of Pluto Gemini, she was born right in the middle of it. So towards that end, then she would have been in her like early youth in 1914. And it's so funny actually in the letters, because there's a lot of documentation even of this time. She was so scandalous for doing stuff very different in school, always like running away, going and doing little adventures for herself, being more chatty. Her dad liked her chatty side, but also rubbed a lot of people wrong that she just like would not stop talking. And she was
just wasn't what women were supposed to do at the time. And she was like, well, then I want to be a man. Like, that's fine. I'm still going to do it.
Yeah.
Which also gives duality there. Like,
I just know even beyond like, just having that undertone of watching a person with Pluto Gemini be born, her entire lived experience is getting to, she had someone else kind of raise her kid, which we hear in our interview story as well. And she traveled around. She lived in other countries. She wrote books. Like she documented all her travels. She shared the stuff that she was learning along the way. Writing was a huge form of like...
up until the very end.
Yeah, and she did it. And yeah, I think this was very common. This archetype of the Roaring 20s led to this freedom for women to like go and kind of live a little bit more wildly, which was really them just keeping up with what they wanted to do. And there was still some resistance to a lot of this, but I think it was the first group where women were also like taking an initiative to find freedom for themselves. And even though the archetypes of marriage were still very woven in, you can see these themes start to
it definitely has that loosey-goosey of Gemini. Like, we're married, don't talk about the parties.
Yes. So as we look through even just like some other celebrities of that time frame as well, we definitely see like a rise to a lot of people that ended up becoming like celebrity culture, even like expanded, where you started seeing people known for poetry and voice acting and being movie stars or sports
baseball players.
Yeah. And so we even thought like it was very interesting, like in its wisest degree. So from 1913 to 1914, Pluto would have been in its, final little grand finale of Pluto Gemini. And we have Rosa Parks born, who ends up getting known for using her voice and speaking up. So Gemini's themes.
Speaking of about harsh truths of society too.
Right. Incredible. And so the Gemini really had such a different archetype than if you look at Pluto Taurus before and Pluto Cancer after. And I think the duality for all of the Pluto Gemini was really to know how to embody some Sagittarius. So to move out from maybe all that busy, quick travel and storytelling and to actually create greater meaning. And I think, that was their zoom out for their generation, was knowing how to find some like higher wisdom beyond all of it and to step into that. But when Pluto moved into Virgo, that would have been this first square for the Pluto Gemini crew. And then from once Pluto moved into Sagittarius, which we all kind of have lived within our lifetime, that would have been the duality plane for Pluto Gemini. And it's actually kind of crazy too, because a lot of Pluto Gemini, I don't feel like they live to be as old. Like,
no, they went fast. I was thinking about
they
that.
really did go fast. Like, I don't know how as many people that actually lived, because there was so much consequence, Plutonian, to the travel. Like, a lot of people got illnesses, and there was so little stuff established for safety protocols that there was just a lot of crazy stuff that happened from that increase in social spreading of stuff, and like us not having a lot of awareness of how to resolve any of that stuff, which Pluto Virgo came and cleaned it up, like really did.
Ooh,
finally
man.
Vaccines started coming out to like stop a lot of it. Yeah, wild.
And there was not a lot of Pluto Gemini to witness that.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah, so with that, we have a little tiny blurb of an interview. Definitely check out Marylou's whole interview in our Pluto Cancer, because she shared so many good stuff. But if you're listening to this Pluto Gemini, she was able to speak to some stories she heard through her mother. And so we were able to get like a really cool little blurb that really spoke to some Pluto Gemini themes. Mm-hmm. And so with that, here's our little interview. And yeah, as far as your dad's parents and your mom's parents, were they around in your childhood?
Well, not very much.
Okay.
Okay, I would say that my father's family kind of came and went.
Okay.
And they didn't really spend very much time with us.
How did they travel in?
They would just, because they were still in that Georgia area.
Okay.
So everybody was in the Georgia area.
Okay.
And so they would just have a car or a truck or whatever. And they did have a little summer house with other relatives on their side of the family, and we would go visit them, and for a couple of days in South Carolina.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't a lot of sharing.
Okay.
Not that that they didn't share that much. On my mother's side of the family, I would say that my grandmother still lived in Kansas City, and she had remarried. So that was my mother's stepfather.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother was a very, very strong person. A little bit like, I don't know, I have to see if I can describe it. She would say that a selfish mother makes for a really good child rearing. So she admitted that she was kind of selfish. Yes.
Well, she also broke the norm, probably getting a divorce then, was probably a pretty big deal.
Yes.
Yeah, that says a lot about her personality in itself, that she probably did that, because that probably was not easy to bridge. Yeah.
No. And so my mother was much closer to, she was practically raised by her grandmother and her great-grandmother, because my grandmother, she was working, and so
she did her own thing. Yeah.
She did her own thing. And the funny thing, I want to skip back to this grandmother. She introduced us to the Ouija board. Now, I'm not sure. I mean, later in past years, we have said, I don't know, should we have been into that? I mean, it was really, there we were all. She set up the table and the Ouija board, and then we would be like this, and we'd be like, oh my gosh, who moved it? What's happening here? And so I would say that we were really.
I love that.
Yes.
But she had traveled around, it sounds like, more than what probably most did. So when she would come to visit, it sounds like it's probably a big character then. How did your mom feel about her? How did you remember watching their relationship?
Well,
was it a little?
I think it was just. It's kind of hard to say. I don't think they were real close.
Yeah.
Okay. That they did come to live with us after my father passed away, and that did help for a while with the financial situation. That did help.
Yeah, because then she still had little ones too.
Yeah.
So that's good. She showed up when it really needed to be there. The Ouija board is so funny. I love that.
So anyway, that was the only time we were introduced to that.
Yeah. Because it's so fascinating to look in history, because that generation right before, speaking even to your grandma, that was a really weird time where people were having kids and then leaving them with like nannies and like leaving. So then the war kind of brought it back to the family unit because everyone had to work together. But I think that selfishness, it like, you know, per se, like that happened right before in that like Pluto Gemini era where people were, you know, kind of breaking some of the roles, but then the war kind of brought it right back to the family because everyone needed each other so bad for resource sharing. Yeah.
I'm glad you told me that because I thought that when I realized that my mother had been raised until the age of 12 by the great-grandmother and grandmother.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow.
Look at that. Looking at some of the history of people like, you know, like we've studied a lot of like the flapper generation. Zelda had someone else raise her kid, and she would have been in 1920. She would have already been in her 20s, so she was probably born like 1900.
She was born in 1900.
Yeah, and so she also just left her kid and left away. So your crew kind of brought it back to the home and family.
Even with Zelda's example, she had a husband and she still had a nanny. Like I can't imagine your grandma being a single mother of the 1900s.
Yeah, that would have been.
So it changed kind of dramatically within the time just because the war changed what mattered. And
Anna was the daughter of, it's a couple of greats back, but anyway.
great. So it would have been your mom's grandparents, right?
Anna would have been.
Yes. Yeah, so
Yes.
speaking to some of what you heard about your mom's grandparents then.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to share just a little bit about what my mother shared with us as we were growing up. She let us know that that she had a lot of birth certificates and she had a lot of written material, letters and things of that nature about some ancestors that we had from Russia. And she was telling us that our great grandfather was the last lieutenant governor of Alaska, and that was at the time that the Russians sold Alaska to the United States. I believe it was maybe the year 1860 something, 67. And so what my mother was telling us was what she had heard while sitting on her grandmother's lap about what it had been like to be in Alaska, to be of this Russian heritage, and that they had 3 trips while the time they were in Alaska back to Russia, to go to St. Petersburg, to leave children to be educated.
Why?
And I was just blown away, like, oh my gosh, because she told me that they would first head towards China, and they would stop and get some wash done and put it back on the boat. And then they would head out and they would go around Cape Hope in Africa, come back up. They would go through the German Sea, go into St. Petersburg, and they would leave children there. There were relatives
just to like
there.
Take in all the information.
Oh, just to be educated. And it was a big thing on language. Language was really big. And so one of the ancestors that, one of the descendants that we had communication with not too long ago, really back maybe 30 years ago, he actually could speak 3 languages.
Wow.
He had been taught, so he knew English and Russian and I think it was French. But and he did, talk about how there was all of this going back and forth to St. Petersburg for education. That they had to take these children back. There were 12 children. I don't know how many ended up going back. So
and then there was journals that you said too.
Oh yes. So what happened was my great grandmother did marry a soldier coming from the Civil War, and he was from the North, and he kept a journal, and this journal was like every day for about 2 years, and he kept this journal, and it really it gave a lot of insight into what was going on during that time period.
Yes. So fascinating, because that generation also, like, there's themes on writing with the Gemini too.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well
so the fact they were even writing more at one point, and then
and that being the generation of your family, you said, that are kind of more like historians.
Yes.
They really the stories.
They were
around.
tracking, like me and V's Gemini love to track. That's why we're
well, yes, they were tracking. So my mother even did a huge book that she gave to all of us that has the lineage of all the sides of the family and their birth dates and things of that nature. And there are some photos too.
Yeah, and so her grandma, then your mom's grandma, really got to travel a lot more, so she probably saw that as like so exotic, like, wait, you've been to all these places and you learned all these things, like getting to peer into another world and perspective.
Exactly. So it was, I know my mother always wanted to write a book about that, and she died at the age of 89 in 2000.
Wow. Okay, thank you. I wanted to hear that because I think that's so interesting. That makes complete sense to the astrology.
Oh, wow.
Thank you guys for checking out another episode of our Pluto series. Please continue to work your way through the series. We are absolutely loving moving through these signs and seeing just the patterns. We'd love to hear any of your thoughts below on what came up for you, or if you have any interesting links within your own family that you've been able to observe. If you want more, definitely keep watching this series, like and subscribe, and we will see you in our next episode. Bye.